Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And this week, we have the special pleasure of having Adam Lundquist with Nerds Do It Better. And Adam, thank you for coming on board with us and let me pick your brain.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of the show.
Yeah. So Adam is an internet marketer, and I have been using him with some of my different businesses. And I was really taken and was really enthused by the way he analyzes things. He's very analytical, but the thing I liked about it was all about data. And the big deal this year at Pilma, our big theme is we're going to be data driven. And you owning a law firm should be data driven too. I mean, no matter, I'm an old dog, but you got to learn new tricks is what I say. So, there's a lot of people like Adam, a lot smarter than I am when it comes to all this high tech stuff and internet. But the deal is you got to know how to spend your money and where to spend it and what's working and what's not working. And it seems like to me, the internet is one of the easier places to kind of check that. I mean, it's a lot easier than grassroots marketing or TV or things like that. You can get more of a handle on what's really working and not working. So I want to talk to you about that today. But before we get started, tell us how you got in this crazy world of internet marketing.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Boston, and I had always wanted to be a radio show host. So I moved out to California and started pursuing that dream. And eventually I did have my own show. I had a morning show for quite a few years, probably 6 or 7. And this was the early 2000s. And the internet was just kind of coming along. And I filmed an interview with this basketball player, and I wanted it to go viral. So what I did is, YouTube had just started. So I put it on YouTube and nothing happened because unlike what everyone thinks, it's not magic. So I started chipping away and figure out how do you make something go viral? So what I did is I started reaching out to people. I started tracking which messages worked. And then really one of the things that made a big flip was thinking about how can I work with their audience? What is it that they want to hear? And by accurately tracking what I was doing and what they needed to hear, I was able to make a video go viral. It was one of the first viral videos, maybe ever. No, not ever, but one of the first ones. And it was Sports Illustrated's number 7 viral video of all time. It got me on VH1 and just all sorts of places. So
who were you interviewing?
This guy, Sam Cassell, he was a basketball player.
Oh yeah.
Like not the world's nicest interview, but it's what I was doing back then. But what it made me realize is that I had a lot more control over what happened on the internet than I did on the radio. So on the radio, tracking is really hard. It's actually pretty much nearly impossible. We were in a small market in Santa Barbara, and what you used to track radio there is called Arbitron. So Arbitron was people literally filling out diaries. So, I mean, I'm sure if you've ever had to fill out something like that, like if you listen to me for 5 minutes and then someone else for 5 minutes, you're not going to accurately fill that out. No one is. And they also only, they would only ask people who had a phone number, like a physical phone number, like a landline, which I was on a rock station that wasn't typically our audience. So I actually never knew how I was doing day to day. But with the internet, I did know how I was doing day to day. I'd watch the views go up. I mean, they never go down, but I'd watch them go up or not go up. You'd see the comments, you'd get the instant feedback. And I saw the power of the internet versus traditional media. Actually, at the time, I not only had a radio show, I had a newspaper column, and I think I had like a magazine column. So it's pretty much everything that doesn't really exist anymore. So I might as well have been like a silent film star. So, we got fired on Friday the 13th, but, I decided I didn't want to do radio anymore. So I went back to school and I got hired to do internet marketing at an internet startup. And we had quite a bit of success there. And then I decided to start my own company. But it was really all about following the data and actually getting that instant feedback that makes the difference. The radio is kind of like Google. It's supported by ads. So if, say, I don't know, like a Toyota-thon came to you and they'd say, hey, we have an ad. So you play their ad, but you'd have no way to say, all right, well, 10 people purchased a Toyota for this. And same way, if you were a legal place, you wouldn't be able to say, some might come to you and say, hey, I heard you on the radio. Did they? What was the message? Did your messaging work? I typically say the same thing with lawyers on billboards. I lived in Philly. A lot of lawyers were on billboards there. Now you can have a tracking number on the billboards, but you can't really test it. Like you would, it's so expensive to buy a billboard, especially in Philadelphia on the 76. You'd never know what message really worked and what message didn't really work. So and that's kind of how I got into it. And the reason I probably have so many lawyers comes when it works well for one, it works for a bunch. So it's basically where I've lived. I have a bunch on the East Coast in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area, and a bunch in California and the Ventura, Santa Barbara, and a little bit San Diego area.
So you work with lawyers on a regular basis then?
Yeah, and it's interesting because each one of them has different bits, right? So as an example, if you're a personal injury lawyer, well, that's a much longer sales cycle because a lot of them get paid only if they win. So you got to think about that and you also get a bunch of crap leads too. You get a lot of people who call and like, oh, I got in this car crash and now my neck hurts. And I don't know if I want to take them or not. DUI, you can get a lot of those. Now, are they profitable? They're not profitable, a little bit. So on the lawyer. Then even for family law, you have contested divorce, which is incredibly profitable. And then you have flat fee divorce, which can be profitable, but only at volume. So it's a little bit about, or it's actually a lot about thinking about what business metrics you're optimizing for. And every client, I mean, not just the lawyers, each one of them basically has different verticals and different things that make them profitable. So I generally would rather get one lawyer, one contested divorce than say 10 flat fee divorces. Although they don't all do both of them, some of them do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, I can tell you, I know this for a fact that the personal injury arena is so much more competitive than criminal and domestic. I don't know if you find that in your what you do, but I can tell you, they dominate the TVs. You might see a bankruptcy lawyer, you never see criminal or domestic lawyers. They just can't. The fees are not big enough, or I don't know why they don't do it. But it's I think the internet was a game changer for sure for a lot of lawyers. And the deal about it, a lot of the young lawyers figured it out before us older lawyers did, and really killed it for a while. But now everybody's caught up, I think, and now it's just like TV, it's saturated, and so you really got to know what you're doing. I mean, you can't. It's like when I first went on TV, you could put up a bad commercial and get a lot of cases. Now you got to have really good. You got to put a bunch of them on there, and they got to be good, and they got to have good call to action. They got to have a good message. And I think the same thing is with internet. Now, when you first started internet, you could have a bad ad. You could be halfway knowing what you're doing and still get a lot of cases. Not the deal anymore. I mean, it's got so competitive, especially in the PI arena. I can say that for a fact.
Yeah, I mean, the cost per click for lawyers is the most out of any vertical that I work in or that I even know of. So a lot of, not a lot of people, but I have a lot of sales consultations. So they ask, how much is a click? Is it going to be like a quarter or a dollar? It's going to be a lot more like $50 to $60 a click in the law one. But that works because if you get a case and it's worth it, you're going to get a lot more. You wouldn't do that if you were bidding on coffee keywords. But it's one of the reasons I like working with lawyers. The other one is because they're usually pretty dogged. If you get them a lead, they're going to chase it down. Not all of them, but enough of them that it's worth working with. And they're pretty straight, which I like. Like they tell you how they feel, and I always like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when you say data driven, that can mean different things in different people. So when you say data driven, what do you mean?
I mean, starting at the business metrics first. So when I look at data, now this is a little different with law firms because I can't always get the data. So like, I don't know exactly which cases they closed as an example, but I do know how many calls or how many form fills they get. So that's so if it's a different vertical, I might start with what's their revenue. But if I can't, I go back and back because I work with some medical ones as well. So first thing I optimize for is form fills and calls with usually a preference on calls. Calls are typically where you're going to see the highest number of closes. And by closes, I mean they turn into a client. A little bit of that is just people like talking to people. A little bit of that is, lawyers are talkers generally, yeah, as you know, but So I optimize for that first. Now, a lot of people will say, hey, we want to get 1 million clicks. Okay, cool. But can you pay the rent in clicks? Not likely. You can in closed cases. Now, the way that I actually look at this is through a data lens because certain words, certain keywords actually have different intent. So if someone types in, say, a DUI lawyer, and that's just all they type in, okay, that gives you a little bit to work with. Someone types in DUI lawyer near me, that's a much higher intent keyword. If I see that DUI lawyer near me is driving more leads, and like I said, I don't always see it on a one-to-one basis, but I do have monthly business reviews with clients, and the client tells me they're better leads without obviously saying who the people are. Um, then I'll bid more on those. We're willing to take a higher cost per acquisition if it leads to higher revenue, and certainly if it leads to higher profit. So the data has to go all the way across it. If you're just looking at link clicks, you're done. If you're just looking at, even if you're just looking at keywords, you're done because there's actually a difference between a keyword and a search query. This is a little bit in the weeds, but just that it's important to know, especially for lawyers. Um, a keyword's what you bid on, but it's not necessarily what you pay for. So you might bid on a divorce lawyer. Okay, that's what you bid on. That's what you think you're paying for. But actually, because of how Google works, what you actually might be paying for is shows about divorce lawyers. I've taken over some lawyer campaigns and they were paying not thousands, but hundreds of bucks for the show Law and Order, which is never going to be a case. So you got to look at the actual search query. Now, this can be, this is probably way too in the weeds, but this has to do with match types and basically the structure of how Google's set up. But you need to both look at your business metrics and you need to look granularly at what you're actually paying for because it's such a huge difference. And once you know what you're paying for, which are the search queries, you then match up your ads to them. And the metric I'm looking at there is click-through rate, which is how many people saw it versus how many clicked on it. And then looking at what's conversion rates, which is how many people either filled out a form or submitted a that's what made a phone call versus how many clicks there were. By looking at these data points, you can typically get a lower cost per acquisition than your competitors, which means for the same amount of money, you're going to get more cases. And so you could raise your budget or lower your budget, whatever, but you're going to be beating your competitors.
Yeah. And I've heard people saying, and I don't know if that's changed. It's been several years ago. I was talking to a gentleman, pretty smart, and he said, the negative keywords are just as important as the keywords. Like you were talking about law and order, well, then if you got that, then you need to go put in a negative keyword. You want divorce lawyer, but not law and order or whatever. I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure you do.
Yeah, it's exactly it. So so if a keyword is what you say you want to show for, a negative keyword is what you don't want to show for. So you'd want to break that apart. You'd want to put, well, I don't know if you want to put end order, but yeah, every week you want to be going in there and seeing your search terms. And what I typically do is I'll add negatives for the words we don't want to show for. And then when the words we do want to show for, I'll make what are specific they're called ad groups, where the headline of the ad exactly matches what the user types in. Now, when you do that, what Google does is it bolds your ad. If you move up, if you get a higher click-through rate, which again, we said is the percentage of people who see it versus click, that'll lower your cost per click, and that'll actually increase your position ranking. So all of these things add up in a system. So you're looking at a big old system here. But by every week doing this, what you typically see is an increase in click-through rate, a decrease in cost per acquisition, pretty much across the board. Now, another thing you can always look at is what's called a landing page, which is the page you send them to. You can also test those. So things I've tested for lawyers are images of the lawyers on it versus no images. Typically, the image will win. Now, of course, nothing's 100%. Like I can't say because it worked in Philly, it'll also work in whatever, New Jersey. But typically people are people and they like doing business with people. They want to see faces. They want to see you're a real person. And that's why you see like, even those huge ones, like who's those huge ones that I saw? Jacoby and Myers, like you always see their faces. Now they're certainly not smiling faces, especially those two gentlemen, but they want to do business with people.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly because you want to. They want to hire lawyers they know, like, and trust, and if they don't see who you are, then it's like they're hiring in the blind, and it's not like they're buying toothpaste. I mean, it's a big decision. I mean, so I think the more more that they can feel like they know you, the better your chances you got. Yeah. So, you know, it's pay per click, and then you got your SEO and your maps, which I guess they call it Google Local now. And then we got this new thing, LSA ads, and a lot of our Pilma members killed it the first 3 months, but now it's got saturated, and they're getting really good cases at good prices, just not getting many because there's so many lawyers in it now. Everybody's figuring out, except domestic and criminal lawyers. Which what I'm thinking is I was talking to a gentleman this morning, actually the marketing director of my old law firm, and he started doing some pay-per-click for lawyers. And he says, man, it's so easy with domestic and criminal. He said, especially criminal. He said a lawyer can dominate their market with like $5,000 a month. He said they get all the business they want. He said now PI, it's a whole different world. He said, but he said it's just so much easier, and that's why I was talking about earlier. I think a lot of criminal and domestic lawyers are missing the boat. I mean, maybe they don't want any more cases. I don't know, but
a little bit does depend on your market too. So like the Santa Barbara market is very expensive because it's a small, expensive market. Whereas say, I don't even know if these names mean anything, but Santa Barbara is a small town in California. It's a real rich town. Whereas say Ventura, it's less expensive to do it there. LA, very expensive. But you also, if you get a contested divorce in LA, you can be pretty sure that it's going to be worth something. It's going to be worth your time. But yeah, he's right. So like when you actually look at a Google search results page, especially online, the top 3, sometimes the top 4, they always are mixing up a bit. Those are all search ads and everyone wants them. The way to show up there is 2 parts. One is to have a higher click-through rate, which when you look at, it goes into something called a quality score. And 2 is outbidding. But even if you outbid like way, if someone has a much better quality score than you, they're always going to show higher. And that's because Google wants it that way. What they care about is relevance. Like what they're scared about the most is that you're going to go to like Bing, which unlikely, but it could happen. And what they want to have the most relevant ads humanly possible. And what they use as a proxy for relevance is click-through rate. So when you know that, you know how to work with Google. And then you say, all right, well, what does the customer want? They want the most relevant ad too. So you want to make sure that you match it as closely as possible. So even to break it down further, if somebody types in divorce lawyer for men, you want your ad to say divorce lawyer for men. You better make sure your landing page says divorce lawyer for men too. And people do search for that stuff.
You know what I was so surprised at? We do this internet domination boot camp, which you are going to be speaking at.
Yes.
In April 22nd, 23rd. And what I was so surprised about, like, I think it was a couple of years ago, we were doing one, and there was a speaker, and he went in and got a list of our attendees and picked about 20 of them. And out of 18 out of 20 had their pay-per-clicks going to their, either going to their homepage or going to their section in their website that dealt with that type of law. And didn't even have, only 2 of them, only 10% of them had landing pages. And I just thought that was the way you're supposed to do it with landing pages, so you could split test and see what's working and then make sure that it kind of pairs up with what your ad's saying. And I don't know, what's best practices? What do you ever see a need not to use a landing page?
No, landing pages are really good for tracking. So you usually have a special phone number on them. And they're also really good for specificity, and they load quick. Now, one of the biggest things people don't realize is that people don't want all the information in the world. So they don't want all the navigation. There's too much going on. They're basically a system to make someone do one specific thing. And actually, I think it's kind of funny you mentioned the internet, the domination, because some of this came from me looking at when I was creating my slides for this. Some really bad legal marketing that I was going to point out. Now, right now I'm in Weaverville, North Carolina, which is not a huge metropolis. I have a couple horses and stuff near me. And these were real life searches. So there was a real crappy Netflix movie called like Her Divorced Friend or something like that. And I typed that in, and 3 separate law firms showed up for that. So anyone who wanted to bid on a 1-star divorce movie on Netflix, starring, I believe, Vivica A. Fox, 3 of them showed up, and one of them is a really big law firm. I think they're, well, not huge, but they're at least across the state of North Carolina. And, like these are real things and they are funny and they're worth showing and they're worth pointing out, but like they're also not funny because people's livelihoods depend on it. Like lawyers are people too. And like if they're wasting their money and they go out of business, that's someone who's out of business and that's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like a crushed dream. Like I don't want that to happen to people.
Yeah. I think the big problem is there's a lot of lawyers out there, Adam, like me. I say I don't know anything, but I guess I picked up a lot of stuff over the years just by doing stuff like these podcasts. But when the internet first came out, I mean, I didn't have a clue. I mean, I wouldn't even know what to ask. You know, a wise man told me it's not the answer, it's knowing the right question to ask. But I think a lot of lawyers don't even know the right question to ask somebody like you. And you see a lot. We see it at Pilma. We see a lot. They're on the list. Everybody's on the list serve all the time talking about vendors. You know, about some of them are like stakeholder salesmen. You know, they promise you the moon and then get your money up front. No guarantees. And I know you can't guarantee certain things, but they're just about getting your money. And when you start trying to ask them some questions, it's like Wolfle dust. It's like a bunch of mirrors. You know, I don't know. It's just a lot of our members get very, very frustrated with it. And then some of them are doing great. I mean, some of them are doing great. I mean, I put it to you this way. I got so bad that I created a company called SEO Police. And I got a partner, and we go, and our big job is to meet with the SEO providers and just go over what they promised in their contract and go over and make sure to keep them honest. And then, just check behind them, which you say you shouldn't have to do that. But if I'm a lawyer, my big job is to practice law and go try cases and win, fight for my client. And I just don't know the right answer. I mean, I don't know all that. You were saying it's getting too deep. It does get too deep for the normal lawyer. I mean, they know what PPC is, and that's about it. I mean, when we start talking about landing pages, I guarantee half our listeners don't even know what a landing page is. And I just think that's that's why we're doing this show.
I totally agree.
That's why we're doing this show. I mean, my job here is to try to educate the lawyers so that they don't get taken, and so they know what the right way to do it. Just like you were talking. I mean, it should be data driven. I mean, if you really, just throwing money up against the wall and hoping some of it sticks is a good way to go broke.
And like I've taken over a bunch from, I won't call them out by name because I don't want to get sued, but a very large, specifically legal marketing firm. We'll call it that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But so yes, I will say that my results are typically better, not 100%, but almost always better. But one of the things that's really important to me is being kind of consultative about this and like explaining what things are. You don't need to know how to do everything, but I think it's important to try and at least explain it. And especially if someone has questions, like I know a lot of people, they get like frustrated about it, but why the hell would you know how to do PPC? They didn't teach me legal marketing when I went to school. They weren't like, hey, here's how to like run a law firm. They were like, no, like here's how to like basically how to like really get into data. It's like I went to school, I did a whole bunch of just incredible data driven kind of things. And like for anyone to get frustrated when your customer asks you a question is insane to me. You should be excited to explain what you do and you should be able to back your reasoning. Now, like I will agree that not everything's going to work 100% of the time. I mean, and like you said, we've done some work together and I tell you, like, I think this is going to work. This is the data I'm basing it on. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to flip and I'm going to tell you why. And there's logic, there's structure behind it. And it's not just me reading a book and being like, hey, I read this in a book once, because nothing's 100%. Like you can test to a confidence interval of 95% things, but everyone is a little bit unique. But one thing that's really, really important to me is really like, I almost consider it done with you rather than done for you. Like I don't want anyone going in there and bidding on the keywords and all this like real technical stuff, but to understand like, hey, this is what we're showing for generally, and this is why we're showing for it, and this is what we're going for. That really helps because the bigger company I took over for, we'll just again call it a bigger company, was saying, hey, look, these people are getting whatever 1,000 clicks a month. Okay, but like how many calls are they getting? Like what what are the calls for? Are they accidentally dialing another number? That kind of thing. So even in my reporting, I always have the actual calls listed out one by one, if applicable. Like sometimes, obviously, I'm not going to get that information, especially for legal people, and just integrate it with their CRM. But like I study a lot of how consultants work and consultative method. I'm actually taking a course with a couple of McKinsey people right now because it's so important to me to, my job is almost like an advisor. Like half of what I do or 70% of what I do is actually the online bit, and 25% is really making sure that people understand why it is, because it is a lot of money that people trust me with. And like, I take that very seriously. Like the company has a funny name where nerds do it better, but like, it's serious money. Like, some of these companies, they're really spending a lot, and it's really important that they know what's happening. Because I've actually been on the other end when I worked for that first digital marketing firm. I forget what we fielded out. Maybe we fielded out like website development or something. I can't really remember exactly what it was, but it was real frustrating to me. I'd say like, hey, what's going on here? And they would tell me all this real technical stuff without answering my question as what's going on here. I don't want to know like, hey, you have a JavaScript that's misfiring. Like, hey, we're having this issue. It's going to take 2 to 3 days. This is the problem. Give me a one sentence, real world, clear answer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's like I tell people, talk to me like a fourth grader, uh, you know, so I can really understand it. Very simplistic. Let me ask you about this because this is something I was thinking about. I guess you do some pay per click. What's your take on click to call versus the regular being at the top of the Google search pages? You know,
I, I like to click to call a lot. So you can only do click to call for pay per click. It's one of those things that Google gives you as like a, I don't know how to describe it, like a bonus, I guess. Um, it works really well. One thing I will caution against is make sure again you're watching your search queries, because if you're bidding on competitor keywords, almost always they'll think that they're clicking to call a competitor, and you just end up with a bunch of frustrated people. And I don't have like I mean, I kind of cross. I work with a couple companies who do SEO, and I do pay per click for their clients. We work together. I don't have any qualms with SEO people. I mean, their whole thing is different. They're kind of like a longer term brand building content thing, and they possibly, so the way I look at it is they could rank you for some words, right? Like that's what they're going for. There's 100% chance, a lot more control with what pay per click offers. And you, the way that I look on it, and I actually, I mean, this was the expression, I ate my own dog food. Like I do the exact same thing. Like you say, all right, well, I'm paying per click, so that's frustrating to pay. But SEO isn't free. You're paying for the content, and content's really expensive. I mean, I would guess a well-written article, I don't know, between 5,000 to, I mean, not 5,000, 500 to $1,000, maybe more or less. I don't know. I don't really have people write my articles, but the once they get there, like that's not a landing page. Like you don't know what they're going to do with the landing pages they make. I know they're either going to become a lead or they're not. And for me, that was always the part that I like, because I can say to my clients, hey, look, we got you 50 phone calls. It costs whatever, XYZ. And these are the phone calls. Whereas when you get a report from an SEO company, they say, hey, now we're ranking for these keywords. Again, to me, that's not a business metric. I'm not anti-SEO by any means. I see the value in it for sure, especially if you're like if you're like a real brand, like that makes sense. For me, for lawyers, I would not do SEO. I'd have like a pretty simple site. I mean, it's actually what I did for my own site. My own site was just a landing page for like 5 years, and it was fine. But as I went to get bigger companies, they needed a bit more context. So I had to put up things like case studies. Well, basically case studies was the big one I had to put up, because it's one thing for me to say, hey, I did a great job. It's another thing to say, hey, look, we increased by XYZ revenue and that kind of thing. But yeah, I have no qualms with SEO. Just you're looking at a different way to do business, or different. You're not going to get that instant business result. You might get a long-term brand boost. To me, that's more of an ego thing, but I have seen businesses be successful with it.
yeah. Do you ever see, I've had some lawyers in some of our masterminds talk about, do great 1 month, the next month, everything goes crazy on PPC. And then one lawyer was in there saying, well, his take on it was that for PPC, you can't turn it off and on. You can volume, you can cut down the volume, but it can hurt you if you cut completely stop. And the problem is there's a lot of lawyers that take 20, 10, 30,000, go into a market, spend it the first 30 days, and they don't get good results. So then they're out, they overbid, they try to outbid everybody. Um, but I don't know, do you see that, or is that just because that was not an expert, that was just a lawyer talking in our mastermind group?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say, I'll give myself a plug. If you do want me to take a look at your account, you can go to nerdsdoitbetter.com/get started. I'll be happy to take a look. But I would say outbidding isn't the way to go. What you'd want to do is improve your quality score. It's a 1 to 10
Yeah.
score that Google gives you. If you have, these are just real extreme examples, but if you had a 10 quality score, which basically means your click-through rate is better than the average for that keyword, and somebody had a 4 out of 10, they would never even be able to match you. But they would almost have to pay double for every single click if their quality score was, say, even a 7 compared to a 10. So they're already paying a ton at the top end. And then you look at your conversion rate. If you can get more people who go, and this is really what moves the needle. Like I harp on this a lot, but you only need to know a couple things. If you can get more people on your page to do what you want, you're going to have a much more profitable business. That is where I would spend the vast majority of my time. It is where I spend the vast majority of my time. I know you've talked to me. I do talk about, hey, what's our offer? What's our offer? What's our offer? Because that's what's going to move the needle. Like you'll probably read case studies of, say, Amazon changing the button from orange to blue and their revenue going up. And that works for Amazon because they get a bazillion people coming to their site a day. But what will realistically work is changing the offer so you can do things like, even say get a 60-minute consultation versus a 30-minute consultation. That can be a difference. But also like changing how your page layout is and how you are specifically talking to someone. So I try to always, and comes from my days of radio, I try to always think about what the person on the other end is seeing, kind of what's in it for me. So in the same way, I was fine looking like a complete ass on the radio as long as the ratings were good because the audience liked it. I'm fine, whatever it takes to get that lead across the line that's ethical, I'm willing to do. So I don't know, if it needs to be a picture of a person, we'll put a picture of a person. If we need to change the headline, then we'll change the headline. Now, I know I'm not gonna say lawyers are egotistical, but maybe
Yeah, they are.
maybe some lawyers want to talk a bit about themselves a bit too much and not talk so much about what the prospect gets. And that's again, like we're looking at an ego boost, but we're not looking at a profit boost. So you're going to feel great, but you're going to lose the office.
Yeah, I've preached for years that they don't really care about you. They really don't care. They, like you said, what's in it for me? I mean, I feel like when people are looking for lawyers, they got two questions. Number one, do I need a lawyer? And if I do need a lawyer, why in the hell should I pick you over all these other people out there that are pinging me 3,000 times a day, on different types of media? And if you can't answer those two questions, you're going to have a hard time, I think. And we had a guy speak one time. He wrote a book about it. He said, never use the word I, us, we. It's always you, yours, because people don't care about you, you know. And I think he's right. I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. It's they all play to that station. What's in it for me? And we're all like that if you think about it. When it comes
Totally.
down to it, I mean, I was on a conference call with these guys. They were telling me all about this, and my bottom line. I said, well, I just come right out. I said, well, what's in it for me? I mean, I let them talk, but at the bottom line is this all sounds great, but what's in it for me? Uh,
Yeah, I think
that's
if you're
not a bad
thinking,
thing. That's just the way everybody's wired. I mean,
yeah, I had a call this morning with a psychologist client of mine, and I asked him what his headline is going to be. He said, I forget exactly what it was, but like I'm a psychologist who does X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, what's in it for the person going to the page? Answer this question. What do they get? Like if you can start with whatever it is, get a free consult, get this. And then if you can say what you do in one sentence, I help XYZ with XYZ. Maybe you're a lawyer. I help whatever. I help local people with their personal injury claims, whatever. If you can nail those two things, you're ahead of almost all your clients. So you run into these where they say, actually, one of my lawyer clients really hates this. So this is actually a really good example. If they say, hey, we have 237 years of combined experience, he's like, yeah, well, what does that matter to anyone? Which actually, he's totally right on that. You say, hey, look, get a free consultation. That's what they're going to get. And then you say, I help XYZ, and then any proof you can have. If you have those, I don't know if it's called AVVO or AVO. I've never actually talked to them, but
Evo.
yeah, if you have a couple AVOs, if you can have client testimonials, obviously, I do want to put this out here. You need to be really careful if you're a lawyer on pay-per-click. So a couple of just throwing it out there for people that I've taken over. I've seen some really bad things. Remarketing ads. Do not have ads following people around if you're a divorce lawyer. If your wife finds ads following you around, say looking for a divorce, that's hot water. You must make sure that you can actually factually back your claims. So I've taken over a couple where they say, hey, we're the best lawyer. That's a good way to get disbarred.
Yep.
Think of a couple others just off the top of my head. Like these are ones I've taken over and like.
Yeah, you can't claim to be a specialist unless you're board certified.
Oh, that's a really important one too.
I mean, if you're board certified, you can do it. But
Bankruptcy lawyers, I'd say don't follow people around with a bankruptcy ad. So be real careful with remarketing like that. That I've seen a lot of trouble with. And obviously make sure you can back up your claims, results not typical, that kind of thing. What you can say, of course, is anything that's true. So you could say, we've won our clients, whatever, $2,800,000. Like you can say that, not a problem. Those kind of things work really, really well. I can't even believe I have to give this caveat, but I'm going to make sure that it really happened. But
yeah, I think, I mean, I read this book, Joe Sugar's. I think it's called The Triggers. What triggers people to take action, and greed and fear of loss is two of them that I think apply a lot to law firms, especially injury lawyers. You got some clients that are just greedy, want something for nothing. As we were talking about, sometimes you get the leads you don't really want.
yeah.
And then you've got people that are afraid that they're going to get taken by their employer or by the insurance company or by the bank or whatever it might be, and they just want what's right. I've always tried to do my marketing when I was doing my law firm. I tried to set up my ads to go after the people that were afraid of losing something, afraid they were going to get screwed over. I didn't want the greedy ones. And listen, the lawyers out there, like you said, these checks, that they work because they call them greed and speed ads. You see them, we can get your money, we can get you this kind of money, we can get it fast. It works. I think it draws some terrible clients sometimes, though. I really do. And I always just tried to put mine on, I mean, my ads would be, not everybody needs a lawyer, but you do need to know your rights. So give us a call, free, to call in, and the consultation's free. Just check it out. And I went it that way, and I have no regrets. I mean, I think I could have got more leads the other way, just to be honest with you, because I mean, I do these masterminds, and some of them are doing them, and they're getting good numbers. I just chose not to do it. I mean, you got to do whatever works for you. It's just like some lawyers just can't get in front of a TV or a video and shout and holler and throw checks up in there. And then some of them have no problem with it. I have no qualms either way. I mean, you can do what works. My deal is, until you're paying my bills, I don't really care what you think.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I might not go for it, I mean, I think they got a right to do what they want to, as long as it's ethical, not immoral. I told that one time to a guy, I said, when you start paying my bills, I'll start worrying about what you think about me. But
And do they think about churn too? Like this is kind of one of the things that I think about with these companies that are like unethical and like, hey, we're going to get you 1 million leads in a month. And then when the month's over, like you have an unhappy client. That's why their companies crash and burn. Their churn must be insane.
it is. It's big time. It's big time, and they come and go. Yep, for sure. So getting back to data. So we talked about that. So I guess the big deal is what you're saying is the big takeaway is that, you really got to look at what your click through rate is and really it's how many cases you get, how many cases you sign up. I mean, when it's all said and done, what's your cost per case? I
That's
mean,
exactly it. If I had two things for your audience to get away with, it's one, optimize for business metrics, so cases, and if you can't be sure on the cases, leads, which are phone calls and form fills typically, and two, get granular. See what you're actually paying for, not what you're bidding on. I think it's going to blow your mind when you see what you've spent hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars on.
yeah, I mean, I preach this thing and maybe I'm preaching it pretty high, but I say you want $6 for every dollar you spend on your marketing. And so to do that, you got to know your numbers. You got to know how much your average fee is for this type of case. I mean, a nursing home case is going to have a lot larger average fee than a speeding ticket, right? So
Definitely.
I can spend, if my average fee on a speeding ticket is, $300, I really can't spend over like $50 to get a speeding ticket case. But now if my average fee is 30,000, I can spend $5,000 to get a nursing home case. I can, I don't want to, but I can. And so I think that's where lawyers are missing the boat. And I hear them say, I've heard this at conferences. I mean, not my conferences, but I've been listening to lawyers, they're at the bar drinking. Oh yeah, man, I spent like $30,000 and listen, man, I got $110,000 back on that 30. I said, I killed it. And I'm thinking you really didn't kill it. You probably just about broke even. You might have made $10,000 if you're lucky. Really, I mean, I don't think you got to think about the all overhead you got, and just everything. I mean, and then the deal is you got to think about, and this is where I don't know if you've had this problem. I've seen other vendors have this problem. You go in and do something for a lawyer and get them leads, and then they just don't do a very good job of closing the deal. They're not responsive or whatever, and then they blame you. Uh, I had that actually happen. I recommended a vendor to a law firm, and he was getting like 400 leads, and he was like signing up one or two cases a month. I said something's wrong, and so I started doing. I did hired a company, ghost calls, lawyer ghost calls, and we called his law firm like 5 or 6 times, and I played in the record. They were terrible. I mean,
Yep.
they were terrible, but they were blaming the vendor. And I'm thinking sometimes you need to not. I mean, sometimes the vendors it's their fault. Don't get me wrong, I know that, but a lot of times it's the lawyer's fault. I mean,
I think it's the same thing where it's like they get on the phone and they're a bit arrogant and they're not thinking about the person on the other end. Like it's a weird way to put your head because you're actually technically being as greedy as possible, but you're also being as helpful as possible because if you just get on and you're like, you're wasting my time. Okay, cool. Then that's not, you're not going to sign that client. That's for sure. But
right?
if you get on and you really, the way I mean, this is the way that I do my sales calls. I actually just cut my mic sometimes because I do like to talk, but I found by doing this a lot that once you get someone else talking and really interested, that's a much better sales call. And like, again, like, why would they teach sales training at law school? They're never going to do that. But
Yeah,
these are things that you don't think about. I mean, in the same way, like, I'm sure if I went and argued a legal case, I would just get destroyed. Like, like it would just be like, I'd have the suspenders and be like, I'm just a country chicken. But
yeah,
like, yeah, I mean, and that's going to be the case with anything. And like, it's a bit of an art and a science. And I think people think because lawyers are so good at talking and arguing cases, although from what I found from doing this, like a lot of times it doesn't even go to trial, but they, it doesn't necessarily mean you're good at sales. And like, I'm not exactly sure how you'd go about learning it, except to be open to it and to kind of check yourself. Like I know my first couple ones were so awkward. It was like George Costanza. Like I had to like cringe and be like, oh, that was the worst call ever. But then you kind of think about it and you think about everything I try to do is structure and system. So I kind of structure it
yeah,
and systematize it. And in
yeah.
the same way, like, like you're a good listener and you are able to, I mean, I could see why you'd be good at it. Whereas some of the other people I talk to, they're like, well, do you know who I am? I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, is this how
yeah,
we're going to start this call?
yeah, yeah. The way this is what I've found is that, and they train you this, and it's kind of, I'm not making an excuse for it, but they train you in law school to think on your feet. Because when you're arguing, you got to sit there, you got to be, while that guy lawyer's talking, you got to be thinking about what you're going to come back with. And then you kind of lose it. You don't even hear the rest of what they say. And that's a lot of times with lawyers, they listen to the clients and, or they're already coming up with enough, answer before they actually listen to them. And what I like to do is, what I always did was, after I'd listen and then I'd rephrase it. So what you're telling me is this dog come up and bit you on your ankle and they broke a chain and you were not on their yard. Is that a fair statement? Well, yeah, it is. And I used to tell all my lawyers and my staff, I said, they're not going to care until they know how much you care. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And so, but if you can get in that active listening, because studies show that people only listen about 25% of what you say. Because either they get distracted or either they're thinking in their head about how, especially if you're saying something that you're trying to argue with them. I mean, they just really, they're already coming up with their rebuttal before you even get halfway through your sentence. And it's hard. I mean, I had to work at it, but I think it, wise man told me you learn a lot more by listening than you do by talking.
Totally.
So yeah, Well, listen, this has been great. You want to give any information about people want to get up with you?
Sure. If you want to reach me, you can head over to nerdsdoitbetter.com. I have all those case studies that I talked about building earlier this year. And you could always feel free to reach out for a free consultation at nerdsdoitbetter.com/get started. That's get-started. What I'll do is I'll take a look at your account and I'll come to you with look at what a couple of your competitors are doing. And if it seems like a good fit, we can work together. And if not, I can guarantee you it won't be a hard sell, because that is definitely not my style.
Yeah. Well, good deal, my friend. Well, listen, thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing you speak at our Lawyers Internet Domination Bootcamp in April of this year. I'm looking forward to that. And to our listeners out there, as always, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.